Hey, what is up guys? This is Nishi from MST.TV here, back with another Market Watch episode. Today we're taking a look at a few of the buyouts that we've seen from the latest quarter century Bonanza set. Bonanza was arguably the best set to come out in the year 2024, as it didn't just bring us reprints of meta-relevant cards like SP and Thrust and Bonfire, but it also gave us really cool rarity upgrades for a bunch of old cards from the game's history. The nostalgia pool is a massive 200 cards, so even though you might have seen a lot of cards being pulled online or by your friends, it's actually really difficult to pull a specific card that you might be looking for. That is leading to a ton of price spikes here early on in the set's lifespan, and we're going to cover a few of the bigger ones today. Let's get started. Before we get started, I do want to take a second to thank the sponsor of today's video, HelloFresh. Let's be real guys, with all of the changes we see with the Yu-Gi-Oh market on a daily basis, on top of working a regular job and keeping up with your friends and family, we all have a lot going on. HelloFresh is here to make things a little bit easier. They provide fully customizable meal kits every week that can help you save on both time and money, providing you with pre-portioned ingredients so that you only pay for what you need. On top of that, everything gets delivered to you fresh, so you don't need to worry about going out to the supermarket or worrying about how long your ingredients will be good for. With HelloFresh, you can tailor deliveries to your schedule by selecting your delivery date or even skipping weeks if you need to travel out to events. Of course, they have a ton of different options available as well. There are more than 50 different dinner options, as well as a ton of different meals for different lifestyles, including fit and wholesome, family-friendly, quick and easy, and vegetarian. Click on the link in the description below or use my code MSTNOV10 to get 10 free meals plus free breakfast for life, one free breakfast item per box while the subscription is active if you are in the US. If you're outside of the US, then the local discount will apply. Thank you once again to HelloFresh for sponsoring today's video. First up, we are talking about Blue Eyes White Dragon. Now, I know there are a couple of different QCR printings of this card with different artworks. Here we're specifically taking a look at the version from the Bonanza set. Now, if you play Yu-Gi-Oh, you definitely know what the Blue Eyes White Dragon is, but just as a reminder, we are getting a structure deck with new Blue Eyes support early on in 2025, and in the OCG, the new cards are actually performing pretty well, so there's a decent bit of hype for the strategy. Naturally, players are going to want high rarity versions of Blue Eyes, but if you aren't a fan of the ghost rares, you don't want to play the DDS or DTP1 copies, the quarter century printings just might be your best bet. On top of that, the nostalgia pool for Bonanza is so big, this card is really difficult to pull. If you have 3 nostalgia QCRs per box, that's 36 in a case. You literally need to open like 6 cases of Bonanza to pull any specific QCR that you're looking for, assuming perfect ratios, and that's just gonna get you 1 copy. So it's pretty easy to see why a card as iconic as this one has been so in demand for the last week or so. Price-wise, this card was initially just under the $100 mark and had fallen down pretty quickly to around $60 to $70. However, within the last week or so, this card has shot up like crazy. There are a ton of sold listings just under the $100 mark, and at the time I'm making this, the cheapest one available on TCG Player is $280, with one sold listing at $295. I don't know if this price is going to stick or if it's just going to take a bit of time for the card to settle back down, but I think that given what little quantity of this card there actually is on the market, the card coming down in price might actually take quite a while. This card is definitely some crazy value if you manage to pull one from one of your Bonanza boxes, but if you're just looking for a QCR Blue Eyes to play in your Blue Eyes deck, you might want to consider picking up some of the SDK art from the 2024 tins, which are coming in at only around $25 instead. Up next, let's take a look at Kaii the Shadow Monarch. So Kaii is perhaps the most iconic of all the monarchs in the game. It's a 2400 body that on summon banishes any card on the field, and if that card is a dark monster, you inflict 1000 damage to your opponent. Kaii is just an amazing form of removal. On top of that, you can do some really interesting things with it. It's a big deal that you can banish Stardust Dragon, which is otherwise really hard to get rid of, or you could banish itself to burn your opponent for the last of their life points as well. That said, it shouldn't be a surprise that Kaii is used in several different Time Wizard formats, the most noteworthy of which is definitely Edison, which has gotten really popular recently. Because of this, we've actually seen both versions of Kaii from Bonanza trending upwards. The quarter century printing was down at around $60 to $65. We've recently seen it bought out and hit the $80 to $90 mark. The other version is the Platinum, which interestingly enough has gone up to around the same price as Platinum Blue Eyes, which is around the $8 to $9 mark. This is already an early price spike, as the card was around $5 to $6 when Bonanza first dropped, which tells us that players are looking at that 200 card pool and realizing that even the Platinums are going to be hard to pull, so they might still be worth grabbing as well. This one, and whether or not you play it, is definitely going to come down to personal preference. I know a ton of people prefer to play Time Wizard formats with cards that were actually available at the time, so like using the Structure Deck Ultras because it feels like that's the most appropriate. But if you want to play something that's maybe a bit nicer than just the Commons or OTS Tournament Pack Supers, the Platinums really aren't a bad alternative that also aren't that much more expensive than those cheaper printings. On to the next one, let's take a look at Dimension Fusion. So this is perhaps one of the most degenerate cards in Yu-Gi-Oh's history, at least it is when we look back at a lot of Yu-Gi-Oh formats with a modern eye. This card lets you pay 2,000 life points, then both players special summon as many banished monsters as possible. This card from the Nostalgia Pool is definitely something for Time Wizard formats, but it's a bit different from something like Kaii. Now, whereas Kaii is seeing a ton of meta usage, Defusion isn't a very popular card. It gets used in a couple of different GOAT variations that are more niche, and it was a key card for the very short-lived Airblade Turbo decks as well, but this isn't something that many people need to play old formats. However, the card was a very popular reprint choice because even while it was in the game, it only had very limited availability. It was only ever printed in Invasion of Chaos as an ultra rare, and then I think Dark Beginnings 2 or Dark Revelations 2 as a super rare. All of its printings were well over the $20 mark, so that makes the printing in Bonanza of Defusion its only accessible printing since 2005, which is just absolutely ridiculous. That was almost 20 years ago. That said, the Platinum version of Dimension Fusion isn't too expensive and might be worth picking up some copies of at only $4 to $5 each. The quarter century printing is interesting as well, as it's the only printing of the card that really stands out, with the Supers and Ultras looking pretty similar. Actually, the QCRs were $20 to $25 a couple of days ago when I was first looking at this card, but now the cheapest copy available on TCG Player is around $40 to $50, so some people are definitely pulling their listings on the card. Personally, this isn't something I'd be going out of my way to pick up because its use is pretty niche and I don't think it's going to shoot up demand-wise. If anything, grab a few of those Platinum Secret Rares, as the old printings are still sitting around $20 and we could possibly see those prices meet somewhere in the middle. Okay, here's an interesting one. It's Thunder King Ryo. So Thunder King is one of the best standalone normal summon monsters in this game's history. It stops searching, it has 1900 attack points, and you contribute it to negate a special summon that does not start a chain and destroy the card. There are actually a ton of old formats where Thunder King was a really strong option, particularly in the side deck, and to be honest, I could see something like this being a really good part of an end board even in the current format, since it's literally just like a mini version of Thunder Dragon Colossus. I do actually think that Sprite ended up using this card at one point a couple of years ago. Anyways, price-wise, there's a lot of QCRs from Bonanza that are being pulled off of the market. When I first looked at this card, Ryo was around $35 to $40 for the QCR version, but now when I'm filming this, the cheapest copy available is actually up to $70. Of course, I do think that the Platinums are worth paying attention to, and I'd actually be looking more into the Platinums rather than the QCRs when it comes to Thunder King Ryo, since the Plats are coming in at only $5 to $6 each right now. Looking at the other printings, yeah, we do have the Secrets and the Ultis, which were really expensive, but up until this printing, Thunder King's last printing was in 2014, and even those couple of common printings it had were around $6 to $7. The fact that you can get Platinums at or under that price seems really good to me, especially with how difficult it is to pull a Thunder King. So yeah, with this card, this is definitely something that if you see it get pulled at your locals or it's in someone's trade binder, I would definitely be trying to pick up the Platinums at around $4 to $5, since I think it has great potential to go up in price more as Time Wizard formats get more and more popular. Moving on, we next have Heavy Storm. So this card is probably one of the most iconic cards in this game's history, at least from a competitive perspective. Its effect is really simple, destroying all spells and traps on both players' side of the field. Now at the moment, this card is still banned in the TCG, but it's been legal in the OCG for a little while. I think that a lot of players are probably assuming that this card will eventually be unbanned here in the TCG too, it just hasn't happened yet. Anyways, this is a card that was legal in several Time Wizard formats, including GOAT and Edison, but also a bunch of other notable ones as well. That said, investing in a high rarity copy of Heavy Storm actually doesn't feel that bad, since you can move it between your Time Wizard format decks and get a lot of mileage out of the one card. The other thing worth noting is that this is definitely the hardest version of the card to get that stands out the most. Like, yeah, there's the MRD first editions, they don't really stand out in my opinion, and the Hobby League ultra rares are really nice, but they're not particularly hard to find or valuable. So I think that this is a good option if you're looking to upgrade your Heavy Storm. However, we've seen the card go up over the last couple of days. This card was at only $25 to $30, but just now we see the cheapest one on TCG Player coming in under the $60 mark, with actual sold listings showing the climb from $30 to $40 to $45 and eventually $60. I feel like this card is just a little bit too expensive to be worth picking up now in my mind. If you can still grab this card for like $30, $40, it's not a horrible pickup, but now that the card has already spiked due to some of that hype, I think it's a good card to let go of so that you can make back more than half of your box of Bonanza back. Okay, so there are a couple of more modern cards I want to briefly mention at the end here, the first one being Allure of Darkness. Now this is an old draw card. It lets you draw 2 cards and then banish a dark monster from your hand, but if you can't banish a dark monster, you have to discard your entire hand. Now theoretically, this card isn't a high risk card, but it is possible that you top deck it, and then you have to gamble and just really hope that you draw into a dark monster to banish. Anyways, Allure is a card that a lot of players are looking at playing in Malice, which comes out in Crossover Breakers. You can banish one of your Malice monsters, which happen to be darks, which can then be special summoned out for free, so this becomes not only a way to draw into combo pieces and hand traps, but also a way to get your engine going. The other cool thing is that Allure isn't a once per turn, so it can be used to dig a lot if you happen to see multiple copies. Overall, I think that this will be a really good card in Malice, probably used at 2 to 3, and it makes sense that people will want to pick up one of the higher rarity versions of the card. Also worth noting is that Allure can be used in some Time Wizard formats as well. A lot of the time though, I believe it is limited to 1. Now that said, Allure does have the original Ultimate Rare printing from Phantom Darkness available, and those are going to be really expensive, costing like several $100s each. Fortunately, the QCRs are a bit more manageable. They're only around $30 to $35 right now. The surprising one to me is the Platinums, which are currently around $10 each. When we compare them, right, like Platinum Kaii is around 10% of the price of QCR Kaii, but Platinum Allure is around 30% of the price of QCR Allure. In this case, I actually think that the Platinum Allures are a little bit overpriced. I would be buying them at around $5 to $6. I would not want to spend $8 to $10 per copy. At the same time, I do think that the QCRs will go up in price gradually. I could definitely see QCR Allure hitting a price of around $45 to $50. Also, as a side note, it is definitely worth checking out the prismatic Ultimate Rare copies of Allure from Bonanza as well. They have a really cool foiling pattern on them that makes them look really awesome. And finally, the last card I want to mention for today is Dark the Dark Charmer Gloomy. So this is of course one of the Link Charmer monsters, able to special summon back a dark monster from your opponent's graveyard. Now in the current format, this card and Hida are the Charmers seeing play. Hida is able to bring back cards like Snake Eye Ash, Alkanix, and Poplar, but Dark is another good option since it can easily be made with Relinquished Anima or Diabellstar, and it can steal things like Diabellstar or Bestial Magnamut in order to trigger their effects. Even though this past year has been all about fire decks, Dark is definitely the most popular attribute in the game, so I definitely expect to see Dark as an extra deck staple moving forward. However, I do think it's worth making note of the other 2 Charmers in the set, Area and Wind. Even though Water and Wind aren't exactly 2 popular attributes in the current game, they definitely could be in the future, and I'd want to make sure that I have them available. However, I do now think that all of these QCR Charmers are actually quite low in price and might be worth picking up. Remember, a couple of years ago, players were scrambling to pick up Starlight copies of the Charmers left and right, and now the QCRs are basically just budget alternatives that look pretty similar, and they're also hard to obtain, just not as difficult as it was to pull Starlights in the past. Now price-wise, Dark is coming in at $20, which honestly I don't hate the idea of picking up a few copies at that price. I have a couple of friends that bought multiple Starlight Darks at $300 each, so this really doesn't feel bad at all. Also, depending on how long you want to be holding onto certain cards for, you might want to consider picking up Quarter Century Secret Rare versions of Area and Win, each of which is around $5 each right now, each of which should eventually go up in price when their format comes around. Alright guys, that is all I have to talk about for today. There's definitely some other stuff going on with the market which I really want to talk to you guys about, so I will be doing another market watch posted for this Friday as well at the end of the week. There are also other things from quarter century Bonanza that I didn't get a chance to talk about in today's episode. We'll try to cover some of those things next week as well. If you guys do have any suggestions for either of those two market watches, please make sure you let me know down in the comment section below. Anyways guys, if you did enjoy today's episode, make sure you hit that thumbs up button and hit subscribe as well if you haven't already. And until next time guys, don't forget to hold on to your MST.TV.